So what's an adolescent livestock guardian dog? Well, basically, it's a livestock guardian dog from roughly about 8 to 10 months of age is when this starts. And it's going to go, till probably about 18 to 20 months of age. Now, I have seen some dogs start as early as 6 months of age, starting to go through some adolescent behavior. And, it's definitely possible for that to not end until about 24 months of age. And so, most of the time we kind of see, from about 8 to about 18 months of age, but there is some leeway on each end there when you can see some of these behaviors start happening. So really, I kind of equate teenage humans and to like adolescent, or a lot of times I'll just say teenage livestock guardian dogs, or, they're going through maybe the teenage months. The one important thing to remember is that, just like, when you're teaching your teenager to drive a vehicle, for instance, and if they make a wrong turn or they get a traffic ticket or stop too fast and, skid the tires or something, you forgive those behaviors because they're learning how to drive, for instance. The exact same thing, applies to a teenage livestock guardian dog. You have to give them some training and you have to provide them some supervision, during that time. And if they make a mistake, for instance, they eat a lamb or a kid that might have been chilled and was still alive. If they eat it by accident, don't go out and shoot the dog. Okay. They will be making mistakes. And so I encourage you to give them some time and to have some patience with your adolescent livestock guardian dogs, because you can have a dog that has all the bad behaviors that livestock guardian dogs can do in those teenage months. And by the time they become an adult, those things will subside and they can be a very good livestock guardian dog. I just want to mention, I know a lot of you have been following the program for a long time. And so for those that might remember Thor's still with us. He was in our first round of the livestock guardian dog bonding project. And Thor was your typical, teenage dog. He roamed a lot. He chased some animals, got out of his pastures all the time, dug holes, a bunch of those bad behaviors. We moved him to several different ranches. And, we had just about given up on Thor. We moved him back here to the center and put him with some yearling nannies. And, he roamed a few times, and then he turned about 22 months of age, and it was just like somebody flipped a switch on that dog. His whole attitude and everything changed. He stopped doing all those bad behaviors, and those nannies kidded out. And he's become a very good livestock guardian dog for us. So, had we gotten rid of Thor or shot Thor, we'd be missing out on a really good livestock guardian dog. So give him some leeway, try to correct those bad behaviors, and I think you'll end up with a good dog at the end of it. So generally what happens with livestock guardian dogs, when they have these bad behaviors during adolescence, it usually equals injury to your livestock. Okay. And usually none of this is purposeful, but it's because of rough play. And so rough play has a lot of different parts to it. And we'll get into some of that stuff today, but it's really important that when you see any type of rough play happening with your livestock guardian dog, that you correct it immediately. And so some things that you can do to help alleviate some of those issues or maybe stop them from coming up in the first place is when your guard dog is younger, say 8 to 10 weeks of age, have them in a bonding pen with some mature ewes and nannies that might have some lambs or kids. And, when those pups are still small, those mature nannies, or ewes that have, young with them can generally teach the dog some submissive behavior. As the dog ages, you have to do some other things, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But you definitely should not have an adolescent livestock guardian dog unsupervised with young livestock. as that dog is starting to go through maturity, 8, 10 months, 12 months of age, you wouldn't want to put them in a pen with a bunch of young lambs or kids. Now, the exception is if you've got an older dog and, they're out on pasture and your older dog behaves the way that you're wanting it to be, your pup can learn some things from that older guard dog. And sometimes your older guard dog will do some corrective measures for you if they see that young dog chasing or biting or chewing or something like that. Another big problem during adolescent times is pairs of livestock guardian dogs. And so, hopefully y'all have been following the bonding project, and you know that we're bonding dogs singly and in pairs. And so usually during the bonding time, I don't see any problems come up. It's once they get released from the bonding pens into a little larger pastures that some of these problems can show up. And so a lot of times what the best thing to do is if you need a pair of dogs and, you've only got one set of bonding pens and you've bonded them together, separate them, when they're going through adolescence. And then, when they get to be 2 or 2.5, you can bring them back together, back into the same pasture. And generally, you're not going to see any more of those adolescent behaviors because they've just matured out of that stuff. So besides keeping them separated through adolescence, some other ways that, you can lessen some of these behaviors is, graduated bonding pens. We start out with a small pen for those weaned pups, and we gradually increase the pen size over time. We don't quite have the perfect situation here yet, but I think, in time, when we have some more funding for some more fencing, we'll get it down pretty well. But we start out in a small 60 by 60 pen, then they go to 1 acre. And, the next thing that would be really good is probably about a 25 acre trap. And then move them into something about 100. And then, by a year or so, they could be out in 500-600 acre pastures. Use hot wire in your bonding pens. Okay, that really helps alleviate the problem of adolescent dogs wanting to roam. We've seen really good success of having hot wire in our bonding pens. And we're also moving for the next round of dogs that's going to be starting in the next couple weeks here. When they leave the bonding pens, they're also going to have an invisible fence collar on them. And so that anytime they go into any type of pasture, if they try to leave or get up on that fence line, they'll be shocked. Rotate out weak livestock. I get a lot of calls from producers, that their dogs are chasing animals or biting, chewing ears and tails and those kind of things. And so it's important that you rotate out weak livestock through the bonding process. And then, if you've got adolescent dogs separated, into some smaller traps, make sure you rotate out those weak animals if they're biting or chewing on anybody. Another thing that's really helpful is adjust the ages of the livestock that you have the dog with as that dog matures. So, it's really nice here. We've got a lot of different ages of animals most of the time. Young pups, can start out with like yearling nannies or kids. And then as that puppy grows and ages, you bring in some nannies or some ewes that are mature. Especially during adolescence, when that teenage time is just starting, 8 to 10 months of age, if they're chasing or chewing on animals, don't be afraid to put them in a pen full of mature rams or mature billies. They're generally not going to put up with that dog trying to chase them, biting them, chewing on their anatomy. And so those mature males will help correct a lot of that behavior for you. If you have to, this one might be a little controversial for some people, but it works for us. If I've got a dog that's continually doing something bad, and I've tried other things, dangle sticks, drags, putting them in with some rams or billies, I'll pull them out of the pasture altogether and I'll kennel them. Generally I'll put them in there for a period of about 3 days first, and then I add a day each time they do something bad. And when they're in the kennel, we're not nice to them. We don't go in and pet them. We don't talk to them. The kennel gets cleaned. We make sure they've got feed, and that's it. And they learn pretty quick that, they don't want to be in the kennels. And so that works for us, and it doesn't affect their bond to the animals or anything like that. There was a study done, I think it was in the early 1990s. They had pulled some dogs that were on open range up in the mountain states. The animals came back into barns. The dogs were put in kennels over the winter, and they found that the dogs actually had a better bond when they were released again with the livestock than they had before. Okay, so those dogs really want to stay because they're away from their charges, and they want to be back with them. Anytime you can catch the dogs in the act of doing whatever the bad behavior is, sternly punish them. I am not nice to the dogs when, I see them chasing animals, or, if they're chewing on animals or something like that. Correct that behavior right then and there. And that also goes for resource guarding. I see that in our puppies a lot of times, and I correct that behavior immediately. So, if you stop those things when they're young enough, you don't have issues later on with your livestock guarding dogs as they're going through adolescence. So hopefully this video plays. This is just kind of an example of, some nannies and ewes teaching puppies submissive behavior here. So you can see that this puppy has already learned to be submissive in just one day being in a pen with, some mature females. And if that's still not working, sometimes you definitely have to intervene in the process. Air horns work really well. Loud clapping, just yelling at the dogs, telling them no, all those kind of things. If you can catch the dogs in the act, will really help you out. Establishing boundaries with your dogs is really important. I get lots of calls on, especially adolescent dogs leaving their pastures, going to the neighbors, showing up at the headquarters, all those kind of things. And so about 60% of the deaths of livestock guardian dogs are caused because they left the home area where they were supposed to be for some reason. They get hit by cars or trapped or shot, poisoned, or sometimes they just disappear because I think they can't figure out how to get back to where they're supposed to be. So, make sure that your bonding pens are escape proof, that there's no way for them to dig out, that they can't climb out. And as I mentioned earlier, what we do is, we have hot wire in our bonding pens. I have not had an issue with dogs ever climbing out, because the bottom wire that they end up running into shortly after they're placed in the bonding pen is a good hot one. And so, if you're going to run hot wire, don't buy a cheap fence charger. Go out and buy the most expensive one that you can afford that has, that'll do the most miles that are available. You want that thing really good and hot. And make sure that you use, at least 2 or 3 8-foot ground rods spaced about 10 feet apart. I have some producers that contact me and they said, hey, I set up a hot wire, but, it's just not very hot. Well, normally the problem is because they don't have enough ground rods and that are deep enough and spaced far enough apart. So, if you're looking for, to put in hot wire, make sure you read up on properly installing the charger and making a good hot fence. Invisible fence collars. That's another one. The system that we use here, for those that have been following us, they're a GPS-based invisible fence system. So there's no buried wires or anything like that. The dogs just come up to the fence line. It makes a little tone on them. and then it shocks them. And I have ours set on high because I want our dogs to have respect for fences. If they leave the pen for some reason, they dig out, they've climbed out, or just somehow they've escaped from their bonding pen, you need to discipline them and put them back immediately. That's one of the biggest things that people think they've over socialized their dogs. And I think to a point you can over socialize your guardian dog, but the majority of the time, the reason that the dog continues to show up at your back porch or at your headquarters is because you haven't disciplined the dog and taken them back immediately to where they belong. I know everybody gets busy. You got to head to town or you've got some other emergency on the ranch, but when you're training a pup, you've got to discipline them and take them back right away. Otherwise, what happens is they get tied up or they get put in the kennel and, somebody comes by and feeds them their leftover sandwich from lunch, or they get a couple pets from the kids or whatever, and maybe some treats. And that dog figures out, well, hey, every time I show up here, I get fed and people are nice to me. So it has nothing to do with really the amount of socialization that you've given them. It's because people aren't disciplining their dogs and taking them back to where they belong in the first place. So getting into some common adolescent behaviors, obviously chasing is a big one. And generally you're going to end up seeing some, young animals that are dead, and they may have bites on them. You might see chewing on ears or tails. The dogs will be patrolling outside the boundaries or just straight roaming. And there is a difference, folks, between patrolling and roaming. Patrolling, the dogs all have a pattern. And if you have GPS trackers on your dogs and you look at their patterns enough, you'll be able to figure that out. But most of the time, what I see is either a zigzag pattern that the dogs are patrolling, or they'll make like circles. And so, a dog that's roaming is generally going in a straight line. If it's a zigzag pattern patrolling dog or a circular pattern patrolling dog, when they're roaming, you may see some of that, but it's going to predominantly be a straight line. And why they roam, we don't have an answer for that yet. But generally, it's a straight line, and it's going to be a very long distance before they stop. So make sure that they can't, climb out of pens again or pastures, that you have, a way to keep them from digging out. So some other things, another behavior that I hear about from time to time, it was an issue with my own livestock guardian dog, is carrying around live newborns. For some reason, some of the dogs seem to think that they need to be super protective, or basically overprotective of live newborns. And so what ends up happening is the dog will be very protective, and then that lamb or kid doesn't get colostrum, or, it doesn't get to get any milk at all later on. And then you end up having a lot of dead young animals around. Another thing besides the carrying around, like I mentioned, they can kind of just be overprotective in general. They may guard the newborns and keep the females away. Excess digging, kind of as the picture shows here. That adolescent dog actually dug that big den, and it was down probably about 3 or 4 feet, and the den was about 3 or 4 feet deep. So a producer was nice enough to send me that photo. Another thing, excessive barking. It takes a while, for your livestock guardian dogs to really understand what things are a threat to their livestock and what aren't. And so, young dogs are definitely going to bark more than your older livestock guardian dogs. And so the biggest thing that I can say is, when they're barking, go out, obviously make sure that there isn't an actual threat, that, there's not something that really is there, and then correct that behavior again. Okay. And then, as I mentioned earlier, visiting the headquarters or your back porch, those are all things that are kind of bad adolescent livestock guardian dog behaviors. So how to correct some of this stuff. I know everybody has different opinions, but these are things that work for us here. And so that's what I'm covering today. But, if you've got a dog that's chasing, For those of you that follow us, this was Squiggy down here that was chasing these goats. And, what worked well for him and some of the other dogs that we've had is a dangle stick. And that's basically what this dog at the top here has. What works well for us is a piece of 2x4. It's roughly about 18 inches long. I put an eye bolt through it. I make sure that I put a lock nut on the bottom so that it doesn't come off. And then make sure that you've got a swivel, at each end. This one, the dog is a little bit young still, so that there's not very much chain there, but make sure that you got a swivel so that it doesn't tighten up, because then it does no good. Okay. Another thing that works well, if you have open pasture, and I know some people do and some people don't, but drags work really well. Whether it's just a straight chain drag, or it's a drag that's attached to like a small tire, or a large piece of wood, parts of like the bottom off of a plastic barrel. All those things can work really well. Again, as I mentioned, if you've got chasing and you really can't use a drag, or a dangle stick's not working, again, put those dogs in with some mature rams or billies, probably 2 to 3 weeks. And I would recommend that you have a game camera, especially one of those new ones, that sends pictures right to your cell phone. Those things are really handy. You can check on the dog throughout the day and see what's going on. And then probably the last thing, and I kind of put these things through my normal recommendations here, is probably a shock collar. If you've got an older dog that's, say around 18 months of age, or maybe even a little older, and you haven't been able to fix the chasing issue and they're still doing it, okay, you definitely need to get a handle on it fast at that point. And so I would recommend a shock collar, and I would definitely probably have that thing, on the maximum setting. One thing is if you're going to have to use a shock collar, try not to let the dog see you. You want the dog to associate the shock with the bad behavior that it's doing, not that you're there. Because otherwise, sometimes, they'll associate the shock with you being there. And then when you go to try to catch them again, they don't want to come to you because they think that they're going to get shocked. So here's kind of a classic example of like some chasing behavior with these dogs. Again, hopefully this video will play for you. So right about now, the producer's going to yell at one of those pups, and you can see the one kind of stops for a minute, but the other one just keeps going. So this producer was having some issues with the dogs chasing, and we got that fixed for him, but she was nice enough to send me this video. So biting is one that goes along, and is usually associated with that chasing behavior. You'll usually see it like on the back legs, as pictured here, or sometimes on the front legs, kind of like right up by where the leg attaches to the body of the animal. You'll see some bites in those areas. Again, make sure that you remove the injured animals, and then, try a dangle stick or a drag. Usually if the animals can get away from the dogs, if they're being slowed down somehow, these things won't happen, and the dogs will eventually give up because, they're not able to catch what they're chasing. I wouldn't do any of these things on adult dogs that you have out, working with your animals. These are all, corrective measures that you need to do in the training process. And so these dogs should be, closer to your headquarters, in smaller pastures, where you can really kind of keep an eye on them. So chewing, generally the tails or the ears, you can see this little kid goat, has a part of an ear missing here. Again, try to pen those dogs up with some mature rams or billies. I know for smaller producers, you may only have one or two of them. It's a little more difficult. But, see maybe if you can borrow some of your neighbors' rams or billies, if they have several of them, and, just be willing to pay for the feed and put your dog in there for 2 to 3 weeks. It usually doesn't take very long, with a dog that's being bad to put them in a pen with some mature rams or billies for those animals to correct that bad behavior. Again, remove any of your weak animals. You can try placing some, bitter apple or some hot sauce, some cayenne pepper, something like that on the areas of some of the animals where the dog's been chewing. And that may or may not, help hinder some of that behavior. I definitely wouldn't do that on, an animal that's already injured, because you're going to irritate the injury with that stuff. But, and again, if you can place a dog with mature animals only, generally you don't have these issues come up. It's when the dogs are with younger animals that you see all these bad behaviors. So the next one, patrolling outside the boundaries. Again, how to alleviate this before it starts is really to use hot wire in your bonding pens. If you're gradually moving bonding pen sizes over time, if you can get to a place where you've got a small trap of 25, 50, even maybe 100 acres, and you can put in an invisible fence system, that's really going to help. It's really shown to help the dogs here. And we've actually been able to retrain dogs, with the invisible fence system that we're roaming. So that project is still kind of going on, but the first round of dogs it worked really well for. The second round, not as well. And so we're looking at starting a third round of dogs with that invisible fence retraining. So we'll try to keep you up to date on that on our Facebook post. It's really helpful with adolescent dogs to use GPS trackers. I know cost is always an issue for everybody, but you've put in a lot of time by this point, getting a good pup and training it. And now the dog is, patrolling outside its boundaries, or maybe even roaming. You need to be able to find the dog and get them back. And so GPS trackers are really helpful for that. You can set up a geofence around your pasture, and whenever the dog comes up to that fence line or crosses it, it's going to send you a text message or email or just an app notification on your phone. And so you can go and find that dog, discipline it, and get it back to where it's supposed to be. The other thing is during this training time, try to keep these dogs in, the area where you've got the best fencing in your pastures. You don't have to have good fencing across your entire ranch, but if you just got a couple pastures that have some really good fencing, those are the ones to use for training your livestock guardian dogs. Okay, so I mentioned roaming. This is a classic example from some GPS tracker data of a dog that was roaming. This dog generally had a zigzag kind of patrolling pattern. And so you can kind of see down here in the bottom, he made a couple zigzags, and then all of a sudden, he went down the fence line of the ranch here and then just continued to keep going. He ended up finally stopping. This is about 4 miles up here at the top of the picture where the blue line stops. That's roughly about 4 miles from the gate on that ranch. And so this dog was one of the first ones that we put through the invisible fence system, and he is no longer roaming now. So again, for roaming behavior, hot wire in the bonding pens, hot wire in the pastures, try to use an invisible fence system and GPS trackers. It'll help you get your dog back. So, oops. So carrying around newborns, what's the best way to hopefully correct that behavior? Again, the biggest thing is when you see it happen, sternly discipline your dogs when they're carrying that lamb or kid around. Okay, remove the dogs from the pastures that have young livestock. Put them in pastures with rams or billies, or older animals that you might be culling later on in the year, or ones that are just have already lambed or kidded and have got larger young animals with them. Place those young dogs with mature ewes or nannies while they're going through the bonding project or bonding time for you, and they'll help teach that dog to be submissive and not to play with their newborns. And again, I mentioned kenneling. I really like to be able to kennel the dogs for short periods of time. And again, this isn't during the actual bonding phase. This is when these dogs have been released from bonding pens and they're in like training pastures. So overprotective behavior. Generally I see this from dogs that haven't been fixed yet, usually males, and they get to be a little aggressive. They may be aggressive towards other dogs. They may be aggressive towards people. They may be aggressive to those ewes and nannies, and being overprotective of those young kids. And so I think at this point, normally I just kind of would say, remove the dogs from the pasture, put a shock collar on them. And again, kenneling, if you have the ability to do that. So hopefully this one plays for you as well. Here's some overprotective behavior. So these dogs are keeping these lambs away from the rest of the herd. So the rest of the herd is down the hill a little ways there. And for whatever reason, these dogs have tried to keep these lambs away from the ewes. So that producer had been working with these pups for a few weeks, and at this point in the video that she shared with us, she just had to call their name, and they stopped that behavior. It was more aggressive behavior towards the beginning, but with some extra supervision and some training, you can correct those bad behaviors in your dogs. So digging. This is just an issue, I think, in general, and I don't know that it's just for adolescent dogs, but it does seem like adolescent dogs dig a lot more than adult dogs do. Provide some shade and cooling troughs, during the summer months. You can see a hole next to this dog there that they've started digging. We've had really good success with PVC yokes on the dogs. Actually, they can be made out of just about anything. I just kind of happen to like the PVC because it's easy to drill the holes and put them together, and it's relatively inexpensive. Oops, sorry about that. If you're looking how to make a yoke, the one in the picture here is modeled after the ones that we use, but one end is kind of shorter there towards the bottom, and I also try to counterweight those so that hopefully they stay on the bottom side. You want the dog to be able to lay down, obviously, to be able to, drink water, eat food, but just not be able to dig out easily. Another good thing, with excessive digging or dogs getting under fences in general, is to be able to put some hot wire at the bottom of the fence. If you've got a place or a section of fence line that's just kind of in bad shape at the bottom, run a couple lines of hot wire across there, and it'll help keep your dogs, on the right side of the fence. Another thing that's been recommended by quite a few producers, we haven't tried this one, but I'm fairly sure it'll work well, is just putting, some canine feces into the holes. They're not going to want to dig through their own feces to get out. So coming up with your excessive barking, again, I want to make sure that, you don't discipline a dog if there's actually a threat there. So, if you've got a puppy or a teenage dog that's barking a lot, again, I'd recommend setting up some live game cameras so that you can just check what's going on right from your phone before you even have to get outside. And then also maybe have a shock collar for them. If you've got a live camera and, you've checked all the different areas of the pasture that the dog's in and you don't see anything, and maybe you've even gone out there with a spotlight and checked and you don't see anything, probably give them a light stimulation or maybe just a tone, and see if that keeps them from barking and bothering the neighbors an awful lot. If you can place young adolescent dogs away from your neighbors, that's usually the best thing. But I know sometimes smaller producers or your smaller pastures might be next to your neighbors. And so they might have to deal with some of your livestock guardian dogs barking quite a bit. It is helpful too, a lot of times, your young dog is just looking for companionship. And so if you can pair them with an older adult dog, they will eventually learn that, hey, this older dog didn't bark at this noise that I heard, and so it's probably not a threat. So again, your older dogs can help do a lot of training for you. Visiting your headquarters or your back porch. Again, hot wire, the GPS-based invisible fence system, those both work really well. And again, that immediate discipline and returning them to the pasture, that's really probably the biggest thing. If you can do that, or, if you've got other workers on the ranch and, tell them, hey, look, if the guardian dog puppy comes back up here, don't feed them, don't throw them in the kennel with the border collies or whatever, don't pet them, correct the behavior, take them back to the pasture they're supposed to be in. It's important to tell people not to feed the dogs if they come up to your headquarters or your back porch, because, what you reward with these dogs, they're going to repeat. And so that's definitely behavior you don't want them to repeat. So that's it for today, folks. It looks like we do have quite a few questions in the chat. And so I'm going to backtrack here and see if we can get some of these answered for y'all. Okay, so William Bryan says he's got 2 female Great Pyrenees that are watching some sheep. They were born November of 21. One of the dogs likes to periodically chase sheep. She's getting rough enough. She's pulling the tags out of their ears. So, these are obviously adult dogs, and they shouldn't be doing this type of behavior anymore. So I guess my first thing is, I would try to pull them from the sheep if possible, maybe one at a time, if you're really worried about predator threats. And as I mentioned, put them in a pen with some rams, for 2 or 3 weeks, kind of monitor their behavior, see what they're doing. You could also definitely try a dangle stick. The dangle stick, like on an adult dog, well, on all dogs, it really should hit about the middle of their legs. And so you might need a little bit more chain on there than that picture I showed in the slide here earlier. But that's what I would recommend. If you can really supervise them or have somebody keep an eye on them a lot at this age, again, a shock collar would be a good thing to help stop that behavior real fast. So the question, strong discipline methods that I use. Well, I'm not afraid to take off my belt and warm up a dog if it's doing something bad, especially with like food aggression. They're normally, almost, or they are fighting with another dog. So I'll pull the aggressive dog off and, I'll warm their butt up with my belt, or if I can, find a switch off of a mesquite tree, whatever I've got handy, I will definitely use. I'm not trying to injure the dog, but I'm trying to make sure that they understand that behavior is wrong. And generally with livestock guardian dogs, these dogs are pretty smart. 2 or 3 times of corrective behavior is usually all you have to do. If it's taking more than that, then, you need to think about a different method of corrective measures. Says Melissa says she's used a spray bottle with a mix of water and vinegar for when her dog starts getting rough with them. And it also works well for a pup because it shoots quite a ways from the spray bottle. Yeah, if you get a good spray bottle, that's definitely something. I actually have used that on training bird dogs that I've had in the past. So that's definitely something worth a try. And I had kind of forgotten about that. Melissa, thank you for mentioning that one. Beverly's asking, how do you stop a dog from chasing and catching chickens? Well, chickens are probably the most difficult thing to, train your livestock guardian dog for. I think the best thing to do, if you've got poultry and you want a livestock guardian dog, is first, have that puppy in a pen that's inside your chicken enclosure all the time, so that dog definitely bonds to your poultry. Then, every day or every other day, I would have the dog on a leash, for instance, or tethered up if it's just yourself. And I would grab some birds and I would hold on to them and I would bring them out and let that dog smell them and see what they're doing, and, just kind of socialize with that hen. As the dog ages, I would, again, keep it probably tethered or on a leash, and then I'd bring in some more birds and just have them walking around with the dogs. By going through that kind of slow, gradual process, you eliminate a lot of the issues that come up later on with the chasing or catching chickens. On adolescent dogs that are with poultry, you got to accept that you're going to have some sacrificial birds. And I know that's hard for some people because they might only have a few hens, or, some of the hens may even kind of be more pets. For those of you that name your chickens, if that's the case, then you need to get some sacrificial chickens to kind of do your bonding and training process with, because they just die really easy. And, it's not so much the dogs are purposely trying to kill them. They're just super fragile. But I guess kind of back to your question, if you've already got that issue happening, I would probably move right to the shock collar stage at that point. Because the birds are so fragile, a little bit of rough play and you're going to have a bunch of dead chickens. And so, what I would do, again, it's really important that if you're using a shock collar on your dog to train them, that they don't know that you're there. So, people are like, well, it's all open around my pens where I'm doing this at. Look, you can go down and you can get a really inexpensive pop-up deer blind or pop-up turkey blind. And, when you come home from work, go out there for a half an hour every day, let the dog out, wander off, go hide behind the blind and just see what they're doing. And if they get ready to grab a bird, or even if they're getting ready to pick up a lamb or a kid, just hit them with the shock collar. You can sit out there for a while and drink some sweet tea and, just kind of keep an eye on the dogs and see what they're doing. Next question from Aaron is, do the invisible fence collars work without Wi-Fi? Yes, they do. The ones that we all have here at the center, they're from the Invisible Fence brand company. If you shoot me an email, I can give you the sales rep's phone number. There's two that are working here, kind of in the general area with us. One is up around the Panhandle, and then the other gentleman is working around the San Antonio area, and they both have extra helpers that can come out and talk to you some more about the invisible fence system. But it works really well. Again, there's no buried wire. It all works off a GPS system. You don't need to have Wi-Fi for it to work. Let's see here. So the invisible fence collars, they run off a rechargeable battery, the ones that we use. As part of the cost of it, each collar from the Invisible Fence brand company comes with an extra rechargeable battery. And so we start out with that. We change the batteries every day because when the dog first goes into the system, they're testing it constantly. And so they're going to drain those batteries pretty quick. After about the first 2 weeks, we go to changing batteries every other day. And then, again, that goes for a couple weeks. And then we finally get to the point where, we're changing the battery about every 3 days. At this point, I have talked to the company several times about, trying to come up with either using 2 batteries or getting an extra large battery in the collar. I would encourage you to reach out to the company and ask for the same thing, because they just don't understand, having to catch a livestock guardian dog. But it does work fairly well. It's just a little bit labor intensive. The next question for Lori is, can you use a shock collar for resource guarding? I would say you definitely could. One of the things is, and I know this topic comes up fairly regularly. And again, I try to encourage people, stop that behavior when they're a puppy, because you're going to see that behavior start in that bonding pen. They're going to growl at other animals. They're going to bark or growl at you. I definitely do not tolerate dogs barking or growling at me when feed at all. And you shouldn't either. There's no reason for that at all. But if you've got multiple dogs, if you've got a pair of pups, one of them is going to, at some point, do some resource guarding. And if you correct it as a puppy, you won't have the issue later on as adult dogs. But if you miss that, and you were new, and we all make mistakes with our first couple of dogs, I would definitely probably go to the shock collar as the easiest way. Next question up is about sending a copy to us. This will be posted onto our YouTube channel, and it's a copy of like the slideshow, Terry. I can definitely send that to you. If you just drop me an email, I'd be happy to. From Katie, the next question is, how long do you recommend leaving the dangle stick or drag on the dog? I guess I would start out with at least a month, because it takes them some time, especially if you're using like a tire drag, to really figure out how to move around well with it. You don't want a tire that's so heavy that the dog can't pull it. That's one reason why, like, if you cut a chunk out of a plastic chemical barrel, especially out of the middle, then it doesn't fill up with dirt and things like that. Or if you just use, kind of a heavy piece of firewood. But I know sometimes old tires are just kind of hanging around. But yeah, I'd leave it on for at least a month, and take it off for a week and see how they behave. If they're still doing the bad behavior, I'd put them back on the drag or the dangle stick, and leave it on for another month again and go from there. I had a dog, it was one of my first dogs. And like I mentioned, we all make mistakes with our first couple dogs. She wore a tire drag for about 6 or 7 months. We finally got that kind of behavior corrected, but it took a while. And so, as long as the dogs can eat and sleep and drink water, I don't really worry about how long I leave any of these things on. I just want the bad behavior to stop, and eventually it will. So William says, one of our dogs left the flock and came up to the shop. I took her back to the sheep and tethered her to a T-post near the sheep, but not with them. Yeah, I would say that's something you could definitely do. The idea is you don't want to, do anything there at the headquarters or at your back porch or whatever. You want them to be out with their livestock, and they need to know that, what they did was bad in those areas. Do I have any advice? This is from Ty. Any advice or tips for introducing a livestock guarding dog to herding dogs? Sure. Basically what we do, Ty, is when the dogs or the puppies are in the bonding pens, we'll bring a herding dog out. At first, I usually just introduce them across the fence line. I'll have my herding dog, on a leash. I just bring them up to the fence line and let those dogs just kind of smell each other and interact across the fence line. I do turn the hot wire off, before we do that. Then over time, I'll just have my herding dog, let him jump out of the truck. He'll just be kind of running around outside the bonding pen. And then eventually we get to the point where, he goes into the bonding pen on a leash, and then he goes into the bonding pen without a leash. And, we do some just very light work, nothing, real crazy with the animals that are in the bonding pen, and just kind of continue to do that until the guardian dogs are old enough to be out of the bonding pen. And then, we come out again and we'll move some animals around with them over time. So Katie says they run sheep and mini zebu cows together. It seems like the dogs have only bonded to the sheep and not the cows. How do you recommend we bond them to the cows' calves? We have serious coyote issues, so it's a must. Well, the biggest thing, it's a little more difficult to bond dogs to cattle. It's not as difficult as it is with poultry, but the main issue is because the cows are going to see the dogs as a threat, and they're a lot bigger. And so you've got to start with young animals, and then over time, cull those older animals. I know it's a little more difficult with cattle because they have a longer life than sheep or goats. But that's the best way, is just to start young, have some, heifer calves in a pen with the livestock guardian dogs. And, as that dog matures and those heifers mature and then they go out into your herd, they'll be more likely not to run away from the dogs, even if the rest of the herd may. And so eventually the cattle will figure it out over time. And if you have any that are aggressive towards the dogs, that'd be a good reason to cull those older cows out. What do you do when this is from Kelsey, what do we do when an older dog, 3 years old, blows right through a hot wire fence repeatedly? Well, I would say, that'd probably be a good case for, like a yoke, where they're going to get caught up in the fence and they can't get through it, or even like a drag. The dog that I had that I mentioned earlier, she was famous. She'd dig under the fence. She'd go through the fence if she could. She'd climb over the fence. So the tire drag really slowed her down a lot. Usually when I would come home from work, if I couldn't find her, I'd figure that she was, stuck on the fence line someplace. And sure enough, she would be. And so, I would go and get her. If you've got a large place, again, most of these training things are for small pastures, not necessarily for small producers, but you need to be training your dogs in small pastures that are close to the headquarters so that you can keep an eye on them. So you could definitely use a drag if you've got a good open pasture, and, they'll get caught up in that. And eventually, they'll figure out that, hey, every time I try to go through, I get stuck and I'm sitting here all day until somebody comes and takes me off the fence line. Jane, as far as the stern discipline, I mean, it's not like we're beating the dogs to, injure them, but they definitely need to learn what is right and what is wrong. And, like I said, what we do here may not work for everybody, but, I don't have issues with our dogs when they go out to cooperating producers. And so they need to learn, proper behavior. And sometimes stern discipline is part of that proper behavior. William's asking, when it comes to resource guarding, at what point is it not okay? Such as, is it okay for them to lightly nudge sheep away from their food dishes? Is snapping at persistent sheep, or do you just not feed them around the sheep at all? Well, I mean, I wouldn't expect, some of our guardian dogs will give way to the sheep and goats. And, I don't know that that's the best thing, because then you end up with a dog, that is constantly thin. And so, if they're pushing the sheep away, even if they're snapping at them, as long as they're not physically going after the sheep, aggressively, some barking, some growling, a little bit of snapping is fine. But if they're chasing the sheep away, that's when I would say, you need to make some corrective measures at that point. Franklin asks, what invisible fence shock collar do you recommend? So the invisible fence brand of the invisible fence is the one that we use here at the center. It works pretty well. It's not cheap, but it is a one-time upfront cost. And so as long as you don't lose any of the rechargeable batteries, or, the collar itself gets damaged, that initial cost is all you're going to pay for that system. So it works pretty well for us, and that's the one I would recommend to you. As far as a shock collar, I can't think of the name of it, but there's a really good one on Amazon that you can buy. It'll take like multiple collars. So if you've got multiple guard dogs, you can use it. I just can't think of the name of it right now. But for anybody interested in that shock collar, just drop me an email. My email's on the screen there. And as soon as I remember the name of it, I'll send you a link to it. So Michelle, she's got, adopted a Gamper that was tied at the end of her driveway for the first 2 years of life. Oh, that definitely was not good. She is not in with stock or without leash, as she's a runner. She has a kennel in the yard. She's used to barking at something. She'd come out there and check on her, and she says she would stop. Now, however, she's becoming very reactive to delivery drivers, large vehicles, runs along the property. She's becoming more and more intense with these behaviors. So they're trying to keep her in the house when she can't be supervised. They walk together when they're doing chores, a lot of praise. I feel like a shock collar may make her more reactive. Wow. I guess the first thing is, I guess it's good that she took in a dog. The dog was tied up for the first 2 years of life and not around livestock. I don't know that dog will ever be a livestock guardian dog. It sounds like, she's more of a property guardian for you, which is good. And she has a purpose for you. Boy, this is a hard one for me. If she's being aggressive towards anybody that comes on the property, then I think you need to move to the shock collar. You might even need to take some actual obedience training classes, which there's a lot of different places you can do that. And so that's probably where I would start, is try to get her to some obedience classes and see, what they really recommend. Since she's not really a livestock guardian dog at this point, even though that's what she was originally bred for. So Kathy's got 5 alpacas. One likes to play with the dog. She starts with a bop to the head, and then he responds with mounting her legs or jumping on her back. He's 10 months old. Okay, so I sometimes, alpacas or llamas, that aren't afraid of your livestock guardian dogs, will definitely play with them. And so I would definitely discourage that behavior as much as possible. Either, discourage the alpaca from playing with the dog, or the dog from doing those things with the alpaca, because as that dog matures, it's only going to get larger. And, eventually, their nails start to get harder as the dog ages, and you're going to start getting some claw marks. And, I'm assuming that you're probably shearing those alpacas. And so the dog's going to create some damage to that hide and tear up that alpaca hair. I would definitely discourage that behavior. So Lisa says she's got an older Kangal who's new to her place. It's getting some inappropriate behavior from the dog, especially with young animals. He remains separated from young stock. Any hints addressing, oh, wow, this dog's 8 years old. Boy, somebody didn't do a good job, for your dog at a younger age. I would say, kind of like some of the things that I already mentioned on the slideshow, try putting them in with, some mature rams or billies. They generally won't, tolerate that behavior, even from an older dog. It may take you a little longer. It might take you a month or 2 months, since this dog is this old, for that dog to learn some submissive behavior. But that's probably where I would start, and I would keep that dog away from any young animals until you're a little more confident that, some of those rough behaviors are not going to keep happening. So Kathy, dog doesn't like a particular person and barks like crazy when they're at the farm. What's the best approach to get the dog to accepting the person? Well, I guess I'd say first off, dogs can smell a lot of things. And, with my own border collie, he likes some people and he doesn't like other people. And I think sometimes there might be a good reason for that. So I guess I would, first, I don't know if this is a family member or just a friend or, maybe a worker, but again, there might be a reason that dog doesn't like that person in the first place. And so you might want to look into some of those background issues on the person. Now, assuming the person, doesn't have any issues with drug use or alcohol use or anything like that, I would definitely have the dog on a leash and just spend some time, with the dog close to you. Let that person let the dog approach the person, and maybe even put a muzzle on them to make sure that the person doesn't get bit, and then just kind of have them interact slowly over time. Start with just a few minutes and then progressively make that time more and more, and then get to the point where, the dog is on the leash but doesn't have a muzzle. And then, the next step is, the dog's just there with the two of you, and then introduce maybe a third person into the mix, and then maybe some livestock, and kind of just take it there. The biggest thing with a lot of this stuff is not to rush any of it, and just go, as slow as possible. Okay, so Jacob says one of their dogs ran off when there was a lot of gunshots. Advice. Gunshots or fireworks, thunderstorms, all those things are really tough on a lot of livestock guardian dogs. And so the best thing, that I could tell you is, just try to kennel those dogs up if there's going to be a lot of shooting going on, or, during a bad thunderstorm, or, in fireworks, put them inside the barn where they can't hear or see any of that stuff. That's really about all that I'd be able to probably tell you to do. You might be able to find an actual dog trainer, and they might be able to do some progressive training where they acclimate the dog over time to louder and louder types of noises. But usually I just try to put them in the barn or kennel them up during those times. Okay, so it looks like our last question today, it's from Madison, is can you adopt older working dog breeds, or is it never a good idea to trust them? Well, I guess it really just kind of depends on the dog. The one thing that I try to caution y'all with when I have a producer conversation is, there's usually a reason that somebody is getting rid of an older livestock guardian dog. If a dog is a good dog and it's working, people generally don't want to get rid of it. And so usually if you see somebody getting rid of an adult dog, it's because, it's a problem for them. And so, you don't want to adopt a problem dog from somebody else. So I really encourage you, if you need an adult dog and somebody has one and they're willing to just give it to you or sell it to you for a very small price, definitely investigate, the reasoning. If they're getting out of the livestock business completely, hey, that's one thing. But if they still have livestock and they're just wanting to get rid of that dog, or they're wanting to sell you, 5 sheep or 5 goats and a livestock guardian dog, I would definitely be a little hesitant to make that purchase. Well, do we have any other questions out there today, folks? Well, thank you, everybody, for logging in today. Hopefully I got to all your questions. If you have any other questions or need anything, again, my phone number is still up there on the screen. Feel free to give me a call at my office, or drop me an email, Facebook message. I'm more than happy to help you out as much as possible. And, if you're a larger producer, I do producer visits in person. Or I can, if you send me pictures of what your operation is or something like that, I can definitely, give you some pointers on how to lay things out better, or how to set them up. So, with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the webinar today. Again, I do want to thank Dr. Redden, the center director here, Sheep and Goat Predator Management Board, for providing funding for the program, and Robert Pritz for helping out with the Zoom presentation. Again, if you've got any questions about GPS trackers, reach out to our sponsor, Lone Star Tracking. They can help you get set up with one of the many types of GPS trackers that they have. And, we look forward to our next webinar in May. Hope everybody has a good day. Thank you for logging on today.